Don't you guys think the term cultural appropriation is thrown around too easily these days? We hear the phrase, "my culture is not your costume," all the time. Maybe you've even seen that one viral clip of white interviewer wearing a poncho, a fake mustache, and a sombrero, and being called out by UCLA students for culturally appropriating Mexican culture.
I think my outfit is offensive. Are you Mexican? No? Yes.
I think it reaffirms stereotypes that are offensive to people.
It's not yours.
Do you find my outfit offensive?
Yes. Yeah.
Why?
Because it's not your culture.
You don't really understand what their culture means and what it means to wear these things, like the hats and the maracas. And you sort of have to understand where all of this comes from for it to not be cultural appropriation.
But when Mexican locals were asked about it, they didn't see it that way and instead were completely fine with his outfit.
Does my outfit offend you?
No, you look nice.
Do you like my costume?
Yes.
Does it offend you?
No.
You like my outfit?
Oh yeah, it's awesome.
Does my outfit offend you?
No, not at all. No, not.
So clearly, people have very different understandings of this term. And that makes me wonder, what exactly is cultural appropriation and what does it mean? Let me explain myself using hip-hop, and trust me, this is related to our later discussions on K-pop and its choreographies. Let me start off by introducing the term culture. So culture is the shared way of life of a group of people, and it often includes their beliefs, their values, customs, language, traditions, and behaviors, among others. And by that definition, hip-hop is not just a music genre, but also a legitimate culture that emerged from the very specific historical and political realities of Black and Latino life. And in other words, hip-hop is a survival mechanism, an exercise in politics and authority, and the foundation for communal identity. It emerged as a means of brutal necessity, born from the brutality of African enslavement in the context of hip-hop as a Black cultural factor and Black marginalization, as well as both historical and ongoing white domination. And the genre gave marginalized communities a way to speak back to systemic racism and build a sense of belonging and camaraderie in a time and place that never fails to exclude and marginalize. Yet, with globalization, hip-hop has become a worldwide phenomenon, inspiring people from many marginalized communities across the globe to use it for self-expression, storytelling, and resistance as originally intended. And across various continents, specifically Asia and Africa, people have authentically engaged with the genre and adapted it into localized forms like K-hip-hop and Afro-hip-hop, respectively. And to me, that could be a sign of respect for the culture's roots rather than a watered-down imitation, hence the term cultural syncretism that I'm later going to discuss. But at the same time, social media with globalization has made hip-hop extremely accessible. It can turn an intricate culture such as hip-hop into a few-second dance challenge or a trendy soundbite. And when that happens, it becomes super easy to reduce the genre into entertainment and aesthetics and to forget its roots, histories, and political meaning. That makes it harder to tell who is genuinely engaging with the hip-hop culture and who is just consuming it superficially. This leads us to the core of our discussion. What is cultural appropriation? So, by definition, cultural appropriation is the unacknowledged or disrespectful adoption of elements from one culture by members of another, usually when a dominant group borrows from a marginalized one in a way that commodifies, distorts, or exploits it. And the key here is the dynamic between the marginalized group and the dominant group. So it often involves power imbalance, as I just mentioned, the lack of permission, which points to the idea of ownership, the lack of credit, and also the lack of understanding. And more often than not, it becomes profitable or trendy for the appropriator while stripping meaning from the original culture, which is why social media is such a big issue, because all these influencers, artists, dancers, and anyone who probably did not have much exposure to hip-hop as a genre prior to the dance trend are engaging in all these fads and trends that they participate in for the attention and for the likes. And that is why it matters to pay attention to the asymmetry built into cultural ownership. While white Americans and other privileged groups can borrow from Black cultural forms freely, they bypass the personhood of the people who created those forms in the first place. And still, that is different from cultural appreciation. So make sure you get a hold of these two terms, cultural appropriation and cultural appreciation. And for beginners, you can kind of see those two terms on opposite sides of a spectrum. So cultural appreciation is a respectful and informed engagement with another culture's practices, aesthetics, or objects. And it involves context, acknowledgement, and mutual respect, which is the biggest differentiating factor between cultural appropriation and appreciation. And it also entails learning the history, honoring the origins, and supporting authentic sources rather than treating the culture like a costume. But even here, the line is not always clean. Cultural appreciation does not automatically protect someone from cultural appropriation. For example, many Korean hip-hop artists work hard to learn the culture, respect its founders, and acknowledge its meaning. Yet hip-hop is still an industry where culture and profit are deeply intertwined. So the question becomes, where does appreciation end and appropriation begin? Who gets to decide? And the truth is, the line between cultural appreciation and appropriation is extremely hazy. It's not a simple binary, and some may even say there is no line between the two. And personally, for me, I'd say it exists on a spectrum, and context matters more than the subject alone. Just one disclaimer before I carry on with this episode and the rest of my episodes is that the definition of these terminology are very subjective. So what cultural appropriation could mean to one person doesn't necessarily mean the same thing to another. So I'm aware that these videos can potentially bring up some controversy and debate, but I'm totally open to that debate, so feel free to comment and provide feedback because I'm still on my learning journey of this broader concept of cultural appropriation and what it means in the performing arts, specifically dance. Okay, so that was a bit of a tangent. To carry on, I could speak of the challenge between differentiating appropriation and appreciation from my own experience. So I personally have been dancing since the 6th grade, so for about 6 years now, focusing on styles like hip-hop, Afrobeats, and reggae. And a few months ago, I was making a choreography using reggae movements, and while looking for inspiration, I came across an article from BBC about the genre's origins. Reggae was apparently created in Jamaica during a period shaped by the African diaspora in the 1960s. And like other African diasporic forms, it carries histories of survival and resistance against white oppression and colonialism. And its very practice symbolizes the retention of their identity, culture, and art amid a time where all people and all nations in Africa were just categorized into this broad term, black or blackness. And given this context, I've come to question my own participation in these forms. As a Korean with no African background and limited knowledge of where these dance forms come from, am I permitted to practice them for entertainment, aesthetics, or even commercial purposes? Does genuine interest, intention, and respect for the history change ethics of participation? Can any of us be completely free of cultural appropriation when historical power imbalances still exist? So if someone saw me performing reggae choreography and posting it on Instagram for over 1,000 people to see, they might immediately think she's appropriating Jamaican culture. And I understand why. Culture highlights how certain forms of knowledge are shaped by the lived experiences and perspectives of particular communities. Reggae dance comes from Afro-Caribbean resistance to colonialism and racism, so its meaning is tied to histories that I, as a Korean dancer, have not lived through. I cannot fully understand what it means culturally, socially, or spiritually for that dance form to affirm my humanity under conditions of colonialism and racial inferioritization. But the other side of the argument, in my defense, dance is also built on exchange. I first learned reggae choreography from a Korean mentor who had trained under a famous dancer from Benin and Ivory Coast based in South Korea. Shout out to Daniel, who likely learned from Jamaican practitioners. And that chain of exchange shows how cultural knowledge circulates globally through different means such as collaboration and mentorship. So this raises a bigger question. Does cultural knowledge, especially forms rooted in historical oppression, belong only to the communities that created it? And does it mean that everyone else outside of that circle or bubble kind of automatically cultural appropriate? Learning reggae dance personally showed me that cultural knowledge can indeed move across communities while staying connected to its origins, but accessibility does not automatically mean that the knowledge belongs to everyone in the same way. So there is also kind of this concept of ownership and claiming whether a certain art form or culture is yours. And at that point, that would be considered cultural appropriation. I can indeed learn the movements and techniques as I'm including the reggae movements into my choreography, but my understanding of the cultural meaning behind them will always be limited by my lived experience as a Korean. So some knowledge can be shared beyond its original community, but its deeper cultural and spiritual significance may still remain tied to the community that created it. Even so, given my identity and upbringing, and despite my intention to approach dance as a means of collaboration and inspiration, I may still be guilty of appropriating Jamaican and the broader African culture. And that is part of what makes this issue and discussion so difficult. Acknowledgement alone does not erase racial injustice or the unequal histories built into cultural diffusion. Hence the term acknowledgement washing, which I will get into in our coming episodes. So that leaves us with a few questions. Number one, who gets to decide whether someone can engage with a culture, such as hip hop? Our second question is anything ever truly pure or free from cultural appropriation? And what makes something authentic? Our third question is, does authentic engagement simply come down to intention, learning the history, and respecting the people who created it? And the last question is, what happens when a culture becomes commercialized, which is directly related to our coming discussions and episodes on K-pop and its choreographies as one big commercial industry. So in the coming episodes, I'll explore these questions through K-pop and its dances and choreography. And additionally, I'll analyze whether a group's dance counts as cultural appropriation or appreciation or even syncretism, and why, because context is essential for understanding where something falls on the spectrum between cultural appropriation and appreciation. And finally, I'll also introduce my own appropriation score, which will help show how I evaluate the authenticity of each group's cultural exchange. And as I mentioned mid-first episode, my definitions of appropriation may differ from you guys' definitions of appropriation, appreciation, or other evolving definitions such as race or racialization. Thank you guys for tuning in on my first introduction episode. What is cultural appropriation and am I appropriating culture? And I hope to see you guys in my next episode. Bye!